Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and this is my channel for transition life coaching, my business where I deal with spiritual coaching and mentoring, and I also will do, as part of that process, I often include, sometimes I will do either readings, astrology charts, human design, Reiki therapy. I have a number of different tools that I work with, and of course if you visit transitionlifecoaching.net, you can actually see all of my offerings. I am still working and updating things. I've had so much going on right now. I put a lot of energy into getting the site together, but I want to do some more regular updates of the blog postings and so forth. And of course to do some more regular updates here. This morning live stream is my sort of connection with people and talking about different issues that people might be dealing with in terms of transitions, and also to give you a kind of idea of ideas that and things that I have some expertise on, or that I can at least address to a certain degree. You get a sense of my point of view and how I manage things. And I always end these live streams with a reading. Now I do what I like to call psychological readings, or potentially spiritual readings as well, but looking more at perhaps attitudes, behaviors, or patterns that might be blocking us. And again, it's a general reading, so certain aspects of it, at least it's something that people can take away for reflection. Now it's Sunday morning. I did have the window open, and I thought about leaving it open, but the birds are so loud outside. I thought, I'm going to be shouting over the birds trying to do this live stream. You can see it's the end of May, and I've still got this really warm sweater on. And it's because I just keep alternating between hot and cold. I wake up and I'm freezing and I want to put something on, and then 10 minutes later I'm roasting hot. This is also just a symptom of my age too, but it can be quite annoying. I find that if I'm here, I'll be sitting, I'll be taking it on, putting it off, putting it on, taking it off, and back and forth and back and forth. But today is, good morning, Jenny. And so this morning it's one of those mornings where I'm like hot and cold at the same time. So anyway, Jen, I was just telling people about my, waking up and then putting a warm sweater on, even though it's May, and then, having it, and then all of a sudden just being like ridiculously hot. So anyway, I don't know. It's supposed to warm up this week. It's been rather gloomy here for the last few days in New Jersey, at least where I am now. I don't know. Some places might have had better weather. Few peaks of sun here and there, and supposedly there's going to be a few today. So anyway, that's I've gotten up this morning, and I had a headache when I woke up, but fortunately that has gone away. Yes, you're saying yes, it's chilly out. Yeah, and I guess we're going to be getting into summer weather soon enough. One of the things I prefer about winter weather is that it's like the skies are much clearer and much crisper. When you start getting into the warmer summer weather, at least here in New Jersey, you have this layer of humidity that kind of lays on everything. And so when you get up in the morning, you'll frequently, especially if it's going to be a really hot day, you'll see like the sun, you'll just be like this white sky with this like little orange ball in the middle that's the sun. It's not my favorite time of year. That's why I prefer autumn, and I prefer early spring. But but there's a lot of nice things about this time of year as well. So, okay, so the topic that I really wanted to think about today, I had a lot of very strange, I had a lot of strange dreams last night. I had a lot of strange underworld dreams last night, connecting with family members who had passed on and stuff. Just very, I'm not gonna get into those, but it was just a really interesting set of dreams that has come up recently for me. The topic that sort of presented itself to me this morning was one connected to comparison and dissatisfaction. Okay, so now there's several cards. I think part of this started when there was a post on Instagram. I think it was by Malakim Tarot, Malakim_Tarot. He actually has quite a good tarot education channel. He has a lot of good stuff on there. And he was showing things from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. He was showing the Two of Swords, the Four of Pentacles, and what was the third one? I'm not Oh, and the Four of Cups. Okay, so those were the ones. Oh, good morning. So she had shown these particular cards, and the one thing that he noted about all of these cards is that you had somebody like this, somebody who's closing themselves off. Okay, so and in the Two of Swords, that's the stalemate card where somebody's just not looking at something. You know, they're like blindfolded and they're kind of like this. So in other words, the heart space is closed off. Okay, I have a card in my own Antarian oracle called Eclipse, and that's really what it is. It's like this kind of green background, but there's this black spot in the middle. It's like this thing that blocks the heart space. And so he was talking about how, you know, Four of Pentacles is where we are too fearful of security, so we're kind of almost miserly in a way. We kind of hang on, we hold everything back because we're afraid we're going to lose what we have. Four of Cups is that's the card of dissatisfaction. That's the, you know, being bored, not looking at the opportunities, just kind of, you know, the opportunity, love being held out, but you're kind of going like this. And then, like I said, the Two of Swords is that stalemate card, but he pointed out, he said, there's a fourth one where somebody's got their arms crossed across their chest. He says, do you know what it is? And it's a very surprising one for a lot of people because it's the Nine of Cups, which is the wish card. Okay, you see a person kind of surrounded by all of these cups, you know, this man sort of sitting in the middle of it, and he's got his arms crossed like this, but he's smiling, he looks very satisfied. And so he pointed out that card actually has a little bit of a nuance. In the Osho Zen deck that I use, that is what they call the laziness card. And anytime it comes up in a reading for somebody, they bristle. Like, what, are you trying to say that I'm lazy? You know, because that's something people don't, especially if people are very tired and have been working very, very hard. The last thing you want to see is a card that tells you that you're lazy. You're just like, bugger off, don't tell me I'm lazy. Because, you know, but the card doesn't necessarily mean that you're being lazy. Maybe more that you're perceiving that you're being lazy. Or it could simply be saying to you, which is really the essence of the closed off. It's almost like, I'm satisfied with what I have, and I'm closing myself off to everybody, and I don't need anybody else, and I don't need anything. Okay, the nines in tarot tend to have to do with situations where we are more independent, and good morning, where we're independent, and the tens have to do more with community. Like when I talk about the 9 and 10 of Pentacles and the 9 and 10 of Cups in the tarot, they one tends to be more individual. So like the 9 of Pentacles will come up, it will show a woman in a garden, like, you know, she's got this beautiful bird and, you know, there's all these pentacles around her, and the idea is that she is strong and independent. So the idea is that this is your own money, this is you being satisfied, being single, being on your own, not needing the help of others. 9 of Cups is the same way. It's a form of satisfaction, like getting your wishes, but this is more about being self-satisfied, which is not a bad thing. But the thing is, the fact that the person's sitting with their arms crossed like this, there's a sense that person, it's like, okay, I have what I want, and it's not necessarily a card of opening yourself up. It's just sort of like, well, I have mine, so I'm okay. That's another potential aspect of that card, on, you know, depending on what cards are around it. Sometimes it is just the like, yay, wish card, getting what you want, but a lot of times it can also just be the idea that you there's that idea of I have what I want, and that's good enough for me. I don't need anything else from the outside, which again can be good or bad depending on the situation. Now, but the tens, of course, are more about community. They may be about literal family. They may be about your presumptive family, your soul family, or the people who you feel most connected to, who also sometimes are more family to you than your actual family, in a lot of cases. I think even in the best families, people who I feel are very close and get on together very well, I think even in those situations, there's always some person or situation where there's some contention. And it's almost like there can't not be, you know, I mean, family life is complicated. And it's complicated further by the idea that we feel that because someone is related to us by blood, that we must treat them a certain way. I have my own opinion has always been with family that I will treat my family respectfully, okay? But at the same time, if I feel that they are judging me harshly or disrespecting me or saying something to me just because they feel like I can say this to you because we're family, I'm like, well, I can also push back at you because we're family. And say, I'm sorry, I don't have to listen to what you're saying to me because I don't accept it, okay? Those are actually the worst ones, especially if we're dealing with things that happen with parents or people who we maybe have viewed as authority figures, and if they kind of try to impress this thing on us that we are not doing something right, or there's something not right about us, or something we're doing is not, we're not sort of being a team player there in terms of what the family wants, that can be problematic at times. And so when you are trying to strike, a lot of times, I'm seeing this in a lot of people's charts too. People have 4th house Pluto or have different things, sometimes 8th house Lilith. There's different aspects that show that somebody may be at odds with particular family members, and there's a need to break some kind of ancestral pattern in that case. It's not that you are just extending the family in the traditional way. A lot of people are not extending families in traditional way. There seems to be kind of a breaking up of that pattern. And there's some people who interpret that as a negative, but I don't. I think there's a reason for that. If you ever read that Shirley Jackson story called The Lottery, that's a very famous one that a lot of people, the lit classes, people will frequently be given that story to read. And I don't want to give any spoilers for people who have not read it, but basically it's where there's a day, I think it's like the 26th of June or something, where everybody gets together and there's this lottery in the town. Like there's this special box, and nobody really knows where this box came from, where the ritual started, where anything. All they know is that they do it every year because they've done it every year from the beginning. And really what it turns out is it's got a really horrific ending, because the person who wins the lottery is not such a lucky person. That person is, well, I mean, if you haven't read it, I mean, basically the person gets stoned to death at the end. But there's no rationale for the lottery. It's just something that's always done. Point being that at least one of the points you can take away from that story is that just because we've always done it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Sometimes we need to break things. Just because grandpa and grandma, I mean, yeah, there's some traditions in our families that are good, that we want to hang on to, that may be that may make us feel connected and so forth. But there may also be a lot of junk that we want to get rid of, and especially if we've lived lives where we don't feel connected to our families for some reason, or we feel like we've been excluded, or like we're the proverbial black sheep, as they always like to say. And depending on what kind of trauma exists in your family, or what kinds of past situations there were, a lot of us come from immigrant families that maybe have had a lot of hardships, especially in America. There's people who have come over under very, very dire circumstances in a lot of these ways, especially if they've came over during mass immigration times, like the late 1800s, the whole Ellis Island era. And I mean, Ellis Island's the one that's pointed out was certainly not the only port of call in the United States. But when a lot of our relatives came over, a lot of Irish that came over during the potato famine, which is probably, although I think my great-great-grandparents who were alive during that time my great-grandparents were around then as well, but they had been in Ireland, then they had moved to Shropshire in England, and then they went from there to the United States. So I don't know, but it was during the famine years. So but we don't know enough about that family to know whether or not that was whether that was their driving motivation, although very likely, because it was a lot of Irish, that probably was. So, but again, all that trauma gets stored in your DNA, and you may act a lot of things out, or you may act in a lot of patterns that have to do with crisis or trauma or desperation at a time when you're not in crisis or you're not in trauma. It's just the way you've learned to live. It's the way you've learned to negotiate things. And, I guess on the plus side, it may mean that you have like a lot of strength when you are in a crisis situation. Like maybe you will have you'll be able to shift into that mode to be able to say, okay, here's how I keep a cool head and stay organized. Like maybe there's a piece that allows you to do that, which is not a bad thing. But it may also be that we fall into that mode at times when we don't need to, times when we should just be relaxing, enjoying where we are. So that kind of brings me to the topic of acceptance. And that is one of the hardest things. One of my favorite lectures, and one I'll probably mention it. I'm sure this will not be the last time that I mention this lecture, because I just think it's such an amazing lecture. Is by Alan Watts, Zen philosopher, and it's basically there's certain variations of it on YouTube, but the basic title that comes up is "You Cannot Improve Yourself." Okay, this is the basic topic here, and that is the touch point from which I do a lot of things. It's why I tend to be against approaches that are all purely cognitive. I can affirm my reality. I can just keep saying the same thing over and over again, and it will make it true. Now, yes, words do have power. I don't want to deny that they do, and our thoughts actually have a lot of power as well. We can create all kinds of stuff with our thoughts. But as it was pointed out, actually, when I was doing my dream cards this morning, I got the creativity card. And it points out that creativity isn't something you do. It's like almost like it's something you channel. It's something that comes through you. It's not something that you consciously plan out. And a lot of things that happen through us, we consciously plan out. If we are working on ourselves spiritually, or we have gone through a transition that maybe oftentimes transition brings something to the fore, right? It's something that comes out about what we're struggling with, what our difficulties have been. And, it's, so when we run into that kind of a space where we are trying to face something, a pattern or something that we do over and over again, we may even recognize, because we may have done enough work to say, I tend to do this same thing over and over again. I should just let go and let this happen, but I can't do it. And usually the thing that we have the hardest time with has to do with controlling a situation. And again, kind of back to that crisis mentality, we feel when something is going wrong, depending on energetically where you're at or what kind of a person you are, because there's, like in Aura Veda, they talk about Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, whether or not you're more, Vata is more air, Kapha is more earth, and Pitta is more fire. I think I have that right. And so if your nature is like mine, I think is very, I tend to be Vata because, I talk, there's the air thing, but I also have a lot of Pitta because I have a lot of fire. So when part of the problem that I have, especially the dissatisfaction problem, is I will wake up in the morning and I'll have a ton of energy to do something. But if I also say am physically not feeling great, like if I'm tired, my limbs hurt, I like I said, I suspect that I might suffer from at least a touch of fibromyalgia at times. Then you just get angry and frustrated because it's like you have all this energy that you want to do something with, but your body is like, no, you can't do this right now, and so then you feel, and then of course you sometimes, certainly if you're somebody that's very high energy, you may overplan, you may be very ambitious and say, okay, I'm going to do these 20 things. And then in the end, if something blocks you from doing that, you get very, very upset. You kind of feel like, or like you're a failure, or you didn't meet your goals, or you didn't, like, there's a whole, like, I don't know, it's like a domino effect. Like it just ends up kind of bringing all this stuff up for people. And the thing is, it's kind of like the idea of acceptance, which we talk about a lot, is just learning to let go and accept where you are. And I'm saying this to you as somebody who's not really very good at doing that. Okay? But and I think a lot of us are not, because we feel an attachment to a certain way of doing things, or we feel like if we let go, like we're being irresponsible, or we're not, we're somehow not, by giving up, like we're admitting defeat in some way. That's why a lot of times we see this Five of Swords card that comes up. And interestingly, the Osho Zen deck calls that the comparison card, where we start comparing ourselves to others. But it's this idea of, I'm defeated, I can't do it, And really, it's not so much that you can't do it. It's just that we don't accept that what's part of our life is that sometimes we need to not do stuff in order to do stuff. That is one of the hardest things to do, to kind of accept where things are. So if I go back to this Alan Watts lecture where he talks about you cannot improve yourself, basically he's pointing out the fact that all the things that we do, literally what I'm just talking about, the way that we kind of talk ourselves in circles around things, and the way our mind gets involved, and you try to control something over here, but then this goes wrong over here. And the problem is, life is not predictable. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, even if you do readings on a regular basis, you still, things can still shift and change. You're not somebody, if you have a strong intuition, you might have a sense of what's coming up, at least in the short term. And maybe sometimes people can see things in the long term. But even if you can see something in the long term, I mean, there may not be a whole heck of a lot that you can do about it right now. And so really, it's just a matter of kind of focusing wherever it is that you need to focus. But some days you're not focused. You're very distracted, and that may not fit in with your plan. If you just said, okay, I'm going to, a lot of times we talk about with time management. I used to talk about this with my students because I would have them and they would not get their papers in late, or they would do stuff, and I would just be like, look, I understand that you have stuff going on, but time management is a thing. If you're going out partying tonight, like, make sure you've put X amount of time into work to make sure your work gets done. There's a way to do it. But oftentimes there's also the way that we feel. Sometimes we don't want to do it. It's like, okay, I ought to do this. And if we have deadlines and so forth, then maybe we do feel like we have to do it. But there's times when maybe we don't have a deadline. Maybe we've set the deadline for ourselves. And I know procrastination is a thing too, where we can continually put something off and put something off. But you also have to consider that the flip side of that is sometimes it's because maybe this is just not the right time to do it. I mean, you may want to do it. Maybe you can start thinking about it. You can start making some plans for it. But maybe you're being blocked from doing it, or it feels like everything that you're doing is stopping you from doing it. Maybe because it's not the right time. And again, this is situation dependent, obviously. But I think we undervalue the idea of just accepting where we are, and we'll start comparing ourselves to others. Like, I'm doing this every day. Oh, but so and so who's doing the same thing as me, they're doing all of this, and maybe I should also be doing all of this. So I'm a failure because I'm not doing what they're doing, and look how much more successful they are. I mean, we can really get ourselves into that trap of doing that. And so that's why, first of all, there has to be, like I said, in my coaching practice, that's why I'm always focused on the person. I'm like, okay, if we're going to do long-term coaching, let's start with you. Like, where are you? What are you good at? What are your strengths? But also, where are your wounds? Where are your weaknesses? Because you have to understand that these are the things that are going to keep you from self-acceptance. You may be constantly feeling like either you're not understood by other people, and again, there's that whole thing about depression that they talk about. Depression is like an anger that's turned inwards, because there is this kind of there's no motivation, because it's like, well, what's the point? People will talk. I finished some counseling courses recently, and they were talking about depression as this like kind of very profound sadness, and it is. But I would say it's not even a profound sadness. I feel like depression is, good morning. What about the converse, when my capacity exceeds others? So, yeah, depression is anger turned inwards. Yes, wow. Okay, when converse, when the capacity exceeds others. So in other words, when you feel like maybe you're doing everything and other people are just kind of mediocre. Yeah, I mean, that can happen too, because then we can sort of feel like, we have a lot of energy to move towards something, but we may feel like we're the only ones doing the work. That's what I call like the civil service conundrum. When I used to work in government civil service, it was like if you were the person who was ambitious and said, okay, I want to learn all this stuff and I want to do this and I want to do a good job, and we're really impassioned about our work, then all the work gets dumped on you and everybody else does nothing. And then in the end, all the people who should have been doing those jobs but decided to offload them on you, now when it doesn't go right, it's all your fault. So that's something that can happen as well, which is why I've often said it's good to want to learn things, but sometimes too, sometimes that's also about yielding control. It's about saying, okay, I need to yield. I need to. Sometimes it's just, as much as I want to come in and fix this thing, I have to let somebody else do it. It's hard. It's hard, especially, like I said, when you're motivated and you kind of like all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And I'm that way too. I know a lot of people. I'm not an Aries, but I have a lot of strong Aries energy. And so it's like, I always feel like, no, I've got to come in and I've got to do this, and I got to do it my way, and I got to make it right. And I know a lot of people with that energy who are that way. And the hardest thing to do when you're in that energy space is to say, okay, I'm just going to yield and let somebody else do it. And if they screw it up, they screw it up. But yeah, back to, and then the comment about depression, yeah, is anger turns inwards. Because yeah, there's this self-loathing that goes on. Because really the person who, this was always a discussion about people who talked about judgment after death. Because they said, okay, if you reach a last judgment, you know, the idea that there's going to be some figures that are there, you know, written down everything you did and are going to judge you. This is the kind of stuff you hear like in Catholic school and stuff like that. But I'm like, no, I tend to agree with those who say no. Probably the only person who's going to stand in judgment of you at death is you, because you are the one who judges you more harshly than anybody else around you. Even if other people are very hard on you, I think as I said yesterday, that becomes the only reason that person can wound you is because it's a reflection of something that you secretly, there's some part of you, that some sabotaging part of you that feels that way. And we all have that. I always feel like that is an aspect of the soul that is either wounded in some way, whether it's connected more to wounded child energy. It depends on the person. But often in women, it can be that negative animus energy, as I have said. It's that energy, that masculine energy that Jung did not like in women, because he said it's that real judgy kind of energy. And again, he's not saying that women are terrible, judgy people. He's saying that he's saying that, you know, there's that aspect of you that is, you know, when really you already have that strongly creative nature. You already have that inner, just by virtue of being female, he would say, which is by you just have that inner capacity to build. Men, it's part of their soul image, and they kind of have to project it outward and work with it in a different way, because he says that's not something that necessarily would come naturally. And again, we could debate this as to when it comes to gender roles these days as to how strictly true that is. But I think more generally, in a macro level speaking, yeah, there's, you know, masculine energy tends to be less emotional; it's more rational, and so that being able to use the depth of emotions, to use intuition, to pull up those innovations and that creative energy is naturally a feminine thing with a capital F. So it's a matter of, but a lot of times, you know, when the masculine energy sometimes manifests, at least in our culture and in this day and age, it can manifest as something that can be very judgy. If you've ever worked in a situation, I worked in libraries for years, and people always talk about how great libraries are. And I'm like, no, libraries can be full of the most judgy people you have ever met. If you work with other librarians, when I was a library clerk, like before I actually became a professional librarian, they were all very, very nice to me and everything. As soon as you get the degree, now you're fair game, because then they want to show like how, then they want to talk about how inadequate you are compared to them. It's it's absolutely unbelievable, and I'm sure that's not the only profession in which this happens, but I always saw that there was this kind of a judgy kind of energy and you know, this little clickiness that you normally associate with middle school that can happen among women, even adult women. Or women who start, you know, trashing each other for how they look and stuff like that. It's just like, you know, really? I mean, you think, you know, it's not a case of all women standing together. I can tell you that. A lot of times, you will get that kind of that competitive energy. But in the final analysis, the thing that the real thing is acceptance of you. With everything, even understanding that you are not necessarily this perfect superstar being, because nobody is. I mean, none of us are. We've all got things that we consider to be foibles, and you know what? That's fine. Everybody has foibles. Even like the people that we think are the most beautiful, the most successful, you know, the Taylor Swifts of the world, she's got problems too. Okay, everybody's got problems. You wouldn't really be a living human being if you didn't. And what Alan Watts was pointing out was he's like, look, sometimes these things that we consider to be foibles or imperfections or problems are there for a reason, and you don't necessarily know what that reason is, or they're just part of how the system works, and you think you know better how the system works. He says that's what the problem is. You think you know better than it, and then you say, well, yes, I know I do that, so how do I stop doing it? And then he says, well, why do you want to know? Because it's a case of just, you just kind of have to let go to a certain degree and say this is the way things are. And that's a very hard thing, because we always feel like we're fighting and we're resisting what's going on around us. And sometimes we just have to say, okay, that's the way it is. Okay, that's the way that person is. Okay, this is the way that I am. I mean, and again, I understand that when there's situations where change needs to occur, this doesn't mean everybody can just kick back and say, well, screw you, I don't have to change anything. Sometimes we do need to make changes, but really, generally speaking, it's not only so much that we're talking about somebody with a really bad behavior that is harming other people, but needs to be addressed. A lot of times this is just the way in which we're constantly looking at ourselves and saying, oh, okay, I'm not healthy enough, I don't exercise enough, I'm not attractive enough, I'm not doing enough things, oh, that person did those things, oh, I haven't even done any of those things. Do you ever hear those things? I used to, when I was in college, when I was in one of my first years, I took an honors course with this guy, Morris McGee was his name, that was right. And he was this really old guy in a wheelchair. And I mean, I remember he would sit in our honors class and he was just like, well, by the time I was 18, I'd read 6,000 books and had been in the army and done this and done that. And what have you people done? And I literally was just like, bugger off, old man. I mean, he's actually written some kind of a science fiction book series too, I think. But everybody thought he was just so awesome. And I was just like, you're just a cranky old man who thinks you're better than anybody. I'm sorry, I shouldn't, I'm sure there's some Morris McGee fans out there, but I was not really a fan of him. So, all the time, occupational risk, it's just, it's just very, I don't know, I feel like when people do that, but the thing is, you're going to find too, like I'll look at my own resume and I'll say, okay, you've got 3 postgraduate degrees, you've written 5 books, you've done this, you've done that. And I still look at it and go, yeah, but I really haven't done anything. And you do that because there's always the standard that you're trying to meet. And sometimes it's just kind of like, you know what, you're good enough. And whatever creatively wants to be expressed through you will be expressed. And not everybody's going to be expressing the same thing, Like I do art sometimes, but I can't compare myself to people who I consider to be great artists. But again, that's just my art. That's just what it is. I'm not a musician. I consider myself to be a really lousy musician. But some people, that's what they're good at. They're great at music. Other things. And it doesn't even have to be those things. We all have something that we bring to the table, even if it's something that we consider to be more mundane. Somebody could be great at, I don't know, building stuff, could be great at doing plumbing, could be great at, people can be great at a lot of different things. People don't always have to have, read 80 million books. That's not where everybody necessarily needs to be. Everybody has something, and the thing is, you want to focus on what wants to be expressed through you creatively, and not so much on, I'm not doing enough of this, and I'm not doing enough of that, and I'm not good enough, and every day we kind of, beat ourselves up over, how we're not good enough. And to a certain degree, you have to just say, okay, yeah, I'm not going to be as good as other people at some things, and so what? I mean, that's fine. I mean, let them be good at it, and I can be good at something else. Or I can, if we're doing the same thing, maybe they have one, like I always feel with other people who are doing what I do, I may agree or disagree with people's approaches, but my feeling is just, okay, well, they have something to offer, and the people who need to work with them will go work with them. I mean, I don't need to, that's why I think I'm just a really bad salesperson, because I don't feel like I'm somebody who can say to you, well, this is why you should work with me and not all these other people. I'm like, I'm going to show you what I have, and if that's something that you feel you need, then you'll gravitate towards what I do. Otherwise, maybe somebody else's approach is better for you. You can't, I don't ever try to sell people on, that I can do it better than everybody else. I just, it's like, okay, my approach is something that works for some people, and for other people, there might be a different approach that works. So I don't like to consider myself in competition with other people. They might consider themselves in competition with me. I don't know, but I don't look at it competitively. I always look at it as, okay, we all are off bringing something different to the table. And actually it's good when we can collaborate and work together too, because it could just be that, everybody works together and pulls in the clientele that is appropriate for them. But in any case, let me move on to our reading, because we're already at 4 minutes after 7. And I hadn't gotten to that point yet. But yeah, it's interesting because kind of yielding to what is the hardest thing to do. It's because there's an element of ourselves where we always want to feel like we're in control. And we feel like if we give that up, we're either failing or we're going to be out of control. And but having that level of acceptance, part of it has to do with figuring out who we are and loving who we are, just for who we are. Okay, wow. Wow. Ton of fire energy today in this reading. Crazy. Okay. All right. So it's interesting. So what's our first card? We have the Queen of Wands. We have the sharing card. Okay. Like I said, this has a distinctly Queen of Pentacles vibe to it, but it is the Queen of Wands. And so, yeah, she's holding up this light here. And that kind of goes back to what I'm saying. What do you have to share? What do we have to offer? How are we sharing in a community of people? And I think part of that too is that sometimes if we're criticized by other people, that's another component of it as well. We may listen to the criticism of others and feel that, yeah, we're doing it right, or, well, if people are going to criticize me, I'm just going to take my ball and go home. You know, I'm not going to do this. But this is just saying no. I mean, you that level of self-acceptance that you have something to share. You have gifts that you have that are worthy of being shared with other people. However, the inner feeling of which we're unaware here, this is the Nine of Wands. This is the card of exhaustion. And if you see the guy in this card, I mean, he does look tired. He's got like the machine gun. He's got all this stuff around him. It's like he's barricaded in. And this is actually sort of like almost like a robot, which is kind of interesting in the day when we're letting AI do a lot of stuff. But this is almost the idea that you are a machine, okay? And that we can sometimes think like we are machines. Like, I just have to keep going and going and going. Like the old Energizer Bunny, you know, the commercials with the little rabbit with the drum going, you know, he keeps going, he keeps going. And that's, yeah, it's the idea, and that we're really exhausted. Inside, it's just like we're drained. It's like, okay, I really need, and the meaning of this card, the Nine of Wands, usually in traditional decks, is you have the guy who's kind of looking around vigilantly. He's called the Wounded Warrior. And this is literally what I was talking about at the beginning of the live stream, the idea that we are constantly creating these routines for ourselves because we feel that this is what's good for us, or that we have to take on certain things, or that we have to defend ourselves against certain things. We follow these patterns all the time of crisis, even when there's not a crisis. So this is saying that inside, we may just be drained and exhausted. And after the Nine of Wands comes the 10, and of course that's the point at which the burden is too much and you got to put it down. You know, you can it's like an excess of fire energy, where things are so intense that it's actually almost burning everything down. So you want to have a point where you are not, if you have not replenished yourself, you can't give to others, okay? And I think a lot of times that's where our frustration comes in. So we need to accept that there are times that we might say, hey, I got to hang back because I need a time out. I need a recharge. The external feeling of which you are aware, exactly what I just talked about, King of Wands. So we got the King and Queen of Wands here. Okay, the creator energy. Okay, and again, the idea of the creator is that you allow creation to pass through you. They came up in one of my dream cards this morning, and I'm probably going to post a photo of that today on my Instagram feed. But yeah, it's the idea that creativity is something that flows through you. It's not something that you manage through this kind of convoluted routine and process. It's something that that if you let it, you allow it, you break out of these routines. There's a day when it's like, well, I plan to do these 5 things today. If you wake up and you say, you know what, that's not what I need to do today. It's okay to go off script. It's okay to go off script. You don't need these routines to protect you. The card that we have next, the advice card, is the totality card. Okay, this is the Five of Wands. And again, this is the idea of all of that idea of competitiveness or competition. But in this case, it's not talking about being competitive. It's talking about, these are trapeze artists, okay? There's one that's they have to pay attention, and one has to grab the hands of the other to move on to the next phase. So this is the idea of, rather than working competitively, working together on things. And totality is also about being focusing on what it is that you really want to do, and not allowing all of these other things that are around us to take precedence. We often can do that. Oh yeah, there's this important thing that I need to work on, but oh, I got to do this first, and oh, I got to make sure I take care of this, and oh, I got to call this person, I got to do this, got to do that. And by the end of the day, we go, oh, I spent all the day on this other stuff, and I didn't focus on the thing I needed to focus on. We all do that. I do that regularly. When I say these things, I'm not saying them judgmentally and critically of people. I'm saying, yeah, this is stuff that we do, and it's part of being human, but it's the idea of wanting to have that focus, and so that you can sort of gracefully move through these things, move through the competition, collaboration being better than competition, seeing where we can work together rather than fight against each other, right? And also, I think the idea is that just a lot of this energetics, all of us in terms of what we're offering to the world, I think there's a creative, the creativity that we all put out all somehow works together. It's not people working against each other. It all somehow works together. Okay, that's kind of what comes into my mind. And our outcome is the Tower. It's the Thunderbolt card. So again, I think in connection with this Nine of Wands energy, what this is saying is that this is something that has to be broken down. And I think for a lot of people it is breaking down. We had the eclipse energy recently that was very, very strong. We've had these powerful solar storms. We've had a comet come through, that the devil's comet has come through. We've had all this stuff that's been happening astrologically. We had a Mercury retrograde. We had all of this tension between Mars and Saturn. We have Mars right now, actually Venus and Mars are in a pretty good place right now, but we have a lot of things shifting and moving. Uranus has played a big role in things right now. So we had a lot of opportunity, because there is a lot of opportunity that's coming. But I think there's a lot of things also that have shaken us to our foundation in a way and have made us rethink, this kind of thing that we're doing, the routines that we have. And so this is saying, look, you want to be totally focused on what it is, where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, okay, if you say, well, I don't know what's happening, well, then maybe your focus is just kind of like, okay, well, I always feel in those cases, the real focus then is to, like I said yesterday, meditation, getting in touch with your inner voice, getting in touch with that part of you where you know what it is that you're supposed to be doing next. And also, there is a card in this deck that didn't come up in this reading called Ordinariness. It's the Eight of Pentacles. And the idea is that maybe you don't always need to be extraordinary. It's perfectly okay to be ordinary and do ordinary stuff. That's another thing too. Frequently, we may always be looking for drama, or we may want things to, we may want a certain amount of drama, or we always want to see, something that's exciting when we get up every day. But sometimes you don't need drama. You just want to, chill out, just enjoy, sit back and not pressure yourself to do all this stuff. But again, silence is a real hard thing. So I always feel like when people are really confused and really don't know what to do, or are getting themselves kind of distracted as to what's important, everyday life, exactly, it's it's okay to accept everyday life. There's going to be some days where all you're doing are the dishes and the laundry or whatever. I mean, and that's fine. It's just because if you're in that moment of acceptance, and if you're in each moment, this is why I think a lot of meditative practices are around awareness. It's the idea that you can just everything that you're doing, no matter how mundane, can also be a wonder. It was one of the things I used to love about doing. One of the things I did love about library work initially was that there was just something comfortable about doing that kind of work, even if some of it was repetitious. I don't know. There was just something about it that just felt very good to be something that was not of huge importance. So we don't always have to try to be somebody big. We don't always have to be superstars. We don't always have to be. But there's a part of us that feels like we're falling down on the job if we're not doing that. And I realize in this world, especially if you are doing things like what I'm doing, like, you're on live streams, you're visible to people, you're getting a message out to people. Maybe you feel that you have to do certain things to be extraordinary, but sometimes it's actually okay to just be ordinary. But yeah, so if you feel like certain things are falling down, it's a matter of coming to an acceptance of that's what it is, and allowing yourself to see what the next thing is that's coming up. Because if it's falling down, it's because it's something that it's something you don't need anymore. You want to build a new structure and move on to a new thing, and you may not know what that is yet, but that's okay. So you just stay at home and do your thing. And like I said, I always feel that making time to feel at home just by yourself, being alone, being in silence, is a good thing to practice. If it's something you're not comfortable with, then oftentimes it's because the mind is trying to do all kinds of stuff and maybe it is uneasy with change that's going on. But I always think, obviously when we get uncomfortable enough, we will find something else to do. But sometimes it's just good to learn to do that, to practice to sit. I did post the I Am meditation stuff yesterday on my feed. Hopefully you got that. And it's so there's a link to that for people who wanted to try that. But generally speaking, I would just say, what this is saying is, in the middle of all this, learn to accept where you are, and learn to accept that, you can, even if you don't think you're extraordinary, other people might think that you are. So anyway, with that thought, we're at about 7:15, so I probably should end this live stream right now. But thank you guys so much for joining me. Thank you for joining me on a Sunday morning. And again, I guess depending on where some of you are, maybe it's later in the day. But again, thank you all again. Very much appreciate it. Oh, you are very welcome. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I will be here tomorrow morning. And yeah, so take care and enjoy your Sunday. Take care. Goodbye.